Stacey from Scout Training, and I'm here to chat all about Google Analytics with you this morning. Apologies for anybody who wasn't able to join our session a fortnight ago. I had some issues with the new system that I was using, and it had locked people out after a certain number. So hopefully you had a chance to catch up this time. So we're going to be running through for about an hour. I'm going to be going through some reports which are going to be really useful to help you understand the types of visitors who are coming to your website. So just a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, there is a chat box down the bottom of the screen. You should be able to see it there. If you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box. I'll try to address them as quickly as possible, but if they're on a topic that I know we're going to be covering soon, I might skip over them, and I'll be answering them verbally rather than by chat as well. I think that's probably pretty much it as far as the housekeeping goes. Hopefully you've got a coffee or something and you're ready to go. And there will be a recording of this available afterwards. So if you do need to duck off for any reason, then I'll be sending out that recording hopefully later on this afternoon, or at least by the end of the week. Okay, so first of all, Google Analytics. You can learn obviously so much about your website activity and your traffic using Google Analytics. It's an incredibly brilliant free tool. If you don't have it installed already, I recommend that you do. And often we're looking at what people are doing on the website, what pages they're visiting, what type of interactions they're having with the website, and they're all incredibly useful pieces of information. But today I'm going to be focusing specifically on a number of reports that help you understand the types of people who are coming to your website, so you can build a picture of who they are, and this can be useful for a number of reasons. You may have an existing idea, some audience owners of who you're trying to target with your business, with your organization, with your website, with your products and services. And you can actually use the data within Google Analytics to track whether or not you're attracting the right type of people, or you may have no idea who is interested in your products or services and you've just thrown them out there, and you can kind of reverse engineer it by using the information in Google Analytics to understand what types of people are interested. So just to clarify, we're not doing any sneaky, creepy, big brother type stuff with Google Analytics. We are looking at all the anonymous data that Analytics has available, and it is still focusing on the trends of these types of people to build a general understanding of who they are, not looking at any personally identifiable information. So certainly nothing creepy at all going on there. If you have the option to have two screens open and want to be running through the reports on your own Google Analytics account at the same time as I am, feel free. Otherwise, there will be a screen that I'll show you after the screen share part, which summarises all the reports that I'm going to be going through. So you will have that opportunity to look through them in your own time. And I do recommend, if you're not doing it now, I'd maybe an hour later on, to look through these reports in your own time and make some notes to either build that profile of who your ideal website visitor is, or again, record that profile of your website visitor and check whether or not it matches up with the people that you're actually trying to target. Okay, I'm going to turn this video off because it tends to slow things down a little bit. Just like to say hello to you all. I'll pop up again at the end. And we'll jump over to the screen share. Oh, so you should be able to see my Google Analytics account now. For today's session, I'm going to be showing you the Google Analytics account for my Scout Digital Marketing and Training website. This website's been live for about 18 months now, So we've got a good amount of data on there. It's a mobile responsive website, and it gets traffic from quite a large number of sources. So obviously it's going to be different to your website, unless you're specifically in the training courses space. So your data and results are going to look different to what mine are, but that's the beauty of it. So we're all using the software, but it's unique and it's tailored to our website and our organisation. Cool. So jumping back to Google Analytics, I've already set myself up to the audience overview screen. When you log in these days, you automatically go to the home screen, but I've logged in a little while ago, so I've jumped in here. One of the things I do want to point out, if you haven't had a chance or if you haven't seen this yet, is Google announced a couple of months ago that they're introducing some new cross-device tracking for Google Analytics, which is really exciting, and they're starting to roll it out to different accounts. So I didn't actually have this blue band at the top of my screen a fortnight ago when I originally did this webinar, where you can sign up to get started, as it says. What's going to be really exciting about this is previously we've had some difficulties with Google Analytics piecing together sessions by the same person where they switch between different devices, and you'll probably find this yourself that you might actually do your original search on your phone, and then later on you jump over to your desktop computer, and you might end up jumping back onto your phone later on, and you're the same individual user. But in Google Analytics, it would actually be tracking it as 3 separate users and 3 separate sessions. So they're using a lot of smarts now, and the information that we're pumping into the internet to try and, again, they're saying it's not using personally identifiable information, but making those connections between the multiple devices that people use to give website masters and Google Analytics masters such as us a better understanding of how people are actually engaging with our website. So if you do see that blue band pop up, I encourage you to get started so you can start making use of those reports as well, and I'll be talking about those in the coming weeks and providing some more information about how you can use them. Okay, one of the things I do want to do before we get started is actually increase the time frame that we're looking at, because what we're focusing on today is trying to get a broad picture of the people who are coming to visit our website. Rather than looking at the most recent visits, I want to get an understanding of all the types of people who've come to visit the website. I'm going to look over the last year. So you can change this time frame to whatever it is. If you only have a couple of months worth of data, just use all of the data you have available. You might want to do a full calendar year. For this exercise, I'm just going to jump back to January and look from 1st of January to the 21st of August, which is yesterday, because obviously haven't finished tracking all of today's data yet. So as we can see there, we've got a lot of information to look at. One of the things that you'll notice, first of all, well, you may notice, but you should notice with my data, is there's a really clear peak in visits during the week and a drop-off over the weekend. And this happens with a lot of professional services and business type websites. We tend to get the most of our traffic during the week. And it certainly doesn't drop to 0 during the weekend because the internet never sleeps, but there is less activity. So that's just one of the first observations that you may look for if there's a pattern with the day or the time during the week or through the month. If there's a pattern that people tend to visit a website, it's really useful to understand those habits that people have, and it may help influence potentially when you're publishing or loading new content onto your website, or when you're trying to drum up traffic. So that's one of the first little bits of information we can write down to profile our visitors. And what I would encourage you to do, which is what I do when I go through this process, is just have a notebook or a text file open if you prefer typing, and just make note of these little observations as you go, because what we are doing is essentially building that target audience persona. And one of the first observations we can get immediately from here is that my ideal website visitor tends to visit during the working week. You can see there was more traffic earlier in the year. I was running, more heavily running some Facebook ad campaigns and Google ads at that time. So that's something that I'm aware of, but there's still that regular flow from Monday to Friday with a greater amount of visitors. Okay, so all the reports we're going to be looking at today are in the audience section on the left-hand side of your menu. I'm going to be jumping around, just picking out a few of them. And the first one I'm going to look at is demographics. I'm going to focus specifically on the overview report for demographics. Now, this is one of the reports in Google Analytics that you have to enable. It's not always there by default. So if you don't see any information in this report when you load it in your Google Analytics, you'll instead see a call to action to turn it on, and you should see some data there within about 24 hours or so. So you need to actually turn that one on and then come back and look at it later. And what's actually happening with both this report and the interest report, which we'll look at next, is Google's tapping into the wealth of information that it has available. And again, it's not personally identifiable, but for people who have opted to share some of their browsing habits and some of their personal characteristics with Google, Google is matching up that information with the visitors on your website. So what we do need to keep in mind here, that it's actually not everyone who comes to your website. Yeah, I'm sorry about the sound. There's a truck that's just pulled up outside. And I'm really hoping it's going to move soon. So I will keep going and hopefully it moves. So I'm doing some demolition near my office, which is very unfortunate. Yeah, so just on this report, you'll actually see in the top right-hand corner, it'll tell you the percentage of users that these reports actually apply to. So it's not looking at 100% of the visitors that we're tracking, but in this case, I'm getting 44.97% of users. That's how many, the percentage of users who have opted to share their age with Google. And in the gender side, there's 44.10% of total users. So that's just the first thing to keep in mind. Obviously, with Google Analytics, we aren't tracking 100% of the visitors to the website. If people have JavaScript or cookies disabled, Google Analytics won't work. So generally that accounts for a small portion of visitors, but this is based on the percentage of people that Google has been able to track. Yep, the truck has just gone. Yeah, no issues with my mic, it was that freaking truck. Hopefully it doesn't come back. Cool, so you'll see here we're starting to get a breakdown of the users, and already we can see that the majority of users who come to visit my website are in the 25 to 34 year old age bracket, and they tend to be female as opposed to male. We can see that the age drops off considerably as we get into those older areas, and there's even the smallest age group of users are in that 18 to 24 year old age bracket. So a couple of things we can pick up really quickly, and hopefully you'll see some standout areas with your own traffic as well. But that's not all we get from this report. If you click on the drop-down menu next to key metric, by default it's showing you users, but there's also some other metrics that we can click through here. So, and the recommended, also the commonly used ones, are really, really valuable. Well, that's interesting. You've got 50-50 male and female. Yeah, I find with a lot of websites there tends to be a skew one way or the other, similar to social accounts, but it's, like we said, it's going to be different depending on every organisation So if you click through all of these, you'll be able to see how, or if there's any difference with the percentage of sessions that those users have. I'm not seeing much of a difference there. We can look at the pages per session, and this is where it starts to get really interesting. So we can see that certainly in those younger age groups, they're viewing more pages per session, and the interest is certainly dropping off in the older age brackets. We can also look at average session duration. And here we've got people in the 35 to 44-year-old age group tend to spend longer on site. And those that are in the 65 plus age group are spending a very little amount of time on site. So they're clearly not very interested in what I have to offer. And then we've got bounce rate. And here we can see that the bounce rate is lower in those younger age groups and much higher, which means more people are leaving the website after only viewing one page in those older age groups. So from here already really quickly, I can start to build a picture of my ideal website user tends to be between 25 and 44 and is more likely to be a female. So certainly not excluding the other areas. And this fits in with the types of services that are offered on this particular website. They're likely to attract people. It's a picture that I already had in my mind. Our training sessions are open to everyone. We don't discriminate or turn anyone away. But seeing the types of people attracted, this is actually resonating with that as well. So it's worthwhile flicking through all of those metrics and just noting down any points of interest there that might be able to help build that picture. And underneath the overview section in the left-hand side menu, you can go more deeply into age and gender as well if you want to actually click around and see what's going on in there. I'm trying to get through a few reports today, so I'm going to skip over those ones. Oh, accidentally clicked it. And instead, I'm going to jump down to interests. And this is another one of those reports that you will need to enable if you haven't already, and it's tapping into that data that Google has available in its vast wealth of databases and information. So again, it's matching up information about with the information that they've opted to share with Google, either through their Google profile or through their browsing habits and browsing activity as well. So it's not going to be 100% of the visitors that are being tracked in Google Analytics, but again, we're seeing a percentage here. So I tend to find it hovers around the 40 to 50% mark. And that's also something you need to keep in mind as well, that we're also seeing the percentage of people who have opted to share this information. So that again influences the type of person they are, either someone who is comfortable doing that or someone who is not aware that they're doing that as well. And there does, from my experience, the people who do tend to share a lot of their information tend to be in that kind of 20 to 40-year-old age bracket. So it could also be why we're getting more data from those types of users. So that's just something to keep in mind. This isn't 100% accurate market research we're doing, but we're using the information we have available. So again, we've got 3 graphs here, which are showing us some information. This point, the key metric is users. That again, you can click through and see how these change based on sessions or pages per session, average session duration or bounce rate. But we're seeing affinity category, in-market segment, and other category. And this information comes from Google's audience marketing. So if you ever do any display advertising using Google Ads, where you can place banner ads and target them at people with specific characteristics, these are all based on those categories that you're able to target. The way that we're using it in this sense, though, is get an understanding of the types of other websites and other things that they're likely doing on the internet when they're browsing. So they're obviously looking at your website, but these are other areas of interest to them. And the reason this is really useful is it kind of fleshes out that picture. We're not just looking at the demographics. This is more of the psychographics, the interests, their behaviours, and It may influence the way you talk to them, the type of information that you share with them through your social channels or through your website, or if you are doing any online advertising, these are the areas which you're more likely to be able to target your ideal customer based on the other types of internet activities they're involved with. So just to explain these interest categories, so affinity audience, just quoting from Google here, affinity audiences were built for businesses currently running TV ads who want to expand and reach further from that campaign with an online presence for an efficient price. Google suggests selecting from these audiences to reach potential customers at scale and make them aware of your business. So this is the types of areas that they are generally interested in. The in-market segment, on the other hand, are people who are researching products and actively considering buying a service like these ones. So Google's really clever at deducing the intent of people on the internet, so whether or not they are just browsing or if they have that intent to purchase or research, so researching for purchase either now or in the future as well. So obviously that's more information from an advertising targeting perspective, but here we can have a look. And we're working with relatively small percentages here. You can see there's not much difference between 3.26% and 2.49% for me. But what I would suggest doing is just looking at the couple of categories that sit at the top of these lists and see whether or not they resonate with what you think your audience is going to be interested in. So I've obviously got news and politics, avid news readers, entertainment and news enthusiasts. They seem like a very aware audience, interested in current affairs and news. And in the in-market segment, we've got employment, business services, advertising and marketing services, which again fits in with, you know, for me, people who are looking at training, people who are running businesses, people who are looking at advertising and marketing their businesses. So that's ticking all of those boxes there. The other category, you'll see some of these kind of overlap with the affinity category and in-market segment. And it's really just, you know, other options of ways that Google is classifying their browsing behaviour. Again, you can delve into more information about these either by changing the key metric from users to something else, or clicking into the reports that sit beneath the overview to look in more detail at affinity categories or in-market segments. But what I would just suggest doing is, like I mentioned, look at those couple of top categories, note them down, and use that to start fleshing out those psychographics of the other types of information your website audience is consuming online, and consider the ways that you may be able to use that to either influence the type of content sharing to interest them, or if you want to use it for advertising, targeting, or those types of things. Cool, so the next one is a report that you would probably be familiar with if you use Google Analytics a lot. We're going to look at, in the geo section, looking at location. And this will build a picture of where your website visitors are coming from. So you've got the world map and the darker blue where the majority of your visitors tend to come from. And then the more detailed table down the bottom, which is showing the breakdown of exactly what percentage of visitors. And you'll likely already have an idea of where you want to target people based on your product and service offerings. But given that it's the World Wide Web, you're likely to be getting visitors from all over the world. In my case, because my services are specifically offered in Adelaide, so Australia is obviously of interest to me, and I can already look more closely at this top line and see that 74% of the visitors to the website during that time are from Australia, and they tend to be more engaged than some of the other areas as well. And it's also where the bulk of my online inquiries are coming from, and the interest in general, there's a few kind of obscurities there, but the interest in general drops off. What you can do is click on Australia if that's the country that's of interest to you and look at that information in more detail. You can see a breakdown by region, which for us is by state. So again, you can get a picture for, you know, of the 74% of people who are coming from Australia, 87% of them are coming from South Australia. So I'm certainly getting interest from the right areas. And again, they're the people who are showing the most interest in the website based on the pages per session, the session duration, and the amount of inquiries that I'm getting through the site as well. You can click from region onto city if you want to focus on the city areas. And for us, it is predominantly based in the capital cities. So the thing with how the geolocation report works with Google Analytics, if you're not aware, is it's actually based on where the user's internet service provider is based, not their specific physical location. So whatever device they're using, whether it's internet connected, it's tapping into an internet service provider, usually the closest one to them. So it's not going to be able to give you that level of specificity of suburb or even particular towns. So particularly within South Australia, most of our activity tends to be shown around Adelaide and in that area, and then there's a few other ISPs that are kind of dotted around South Australia. So, I mean, as you can see, we've got Mount Gambier down here with a couple of visits from there. So this is going to help build up those demographics, just an idea of, you know, where are most of your visitors coming from, who's the most engaged visitors based on where they're coming from. Is your targeting a bit off if you're getting, you know, tending to get a lot of people from the wrong area, or are there some opportunities of interest in the areas for people who might be interested in purchasing or being involved with your products and services as well. So spend a bit of time getting familiar with the different locations, with that focus on where the majority of the visitors are coming from, as well as those who are showing the greatest interest in your website based on the behavioural characteristics. So low bounce rate, high pages per session, high average session duration, and if you are tracking any conversions online, like online inquiries or anything, where are the majority of those conversions coming from? Cool, we're about halfway through. I know I'm cramming a lot in, but like I said, there'll be a screen at the end where I'll list all of these reports, and if you're not doing so already, suggest running through them in your own time. So behaviour. Which sits just beneath the geo section, and specifically I'm going to be looking at the new versus returning visitor report. Now you'll see a little pie graph of this on the audience overview page, which shows you the overall percentage breakdown. So what percentage of visitors are new visitors, which means they've come to the website for the first time or once during that time period, and what percentage are returning visitors, so people who have visited the website multiple times. And we can see that percentage breakdown here as well. So I have a high portion of new visitors who are coming to the website for the first time, and on this time frame, a smaller portion of returning visitors. Again, like all of this is going to vary depending on what your website intention is and what your organisation or purpose is. And there's no right or wrong as to what breakdown you should have in new visitors versus returning visitors. Generally, we always want to get some portion of new visitors to our website because we're, you know, constantly reaching out and engaging new people. And some organisations and businesses do need that high turnover of new people constantly coming. However, you might also have a smaller community of people who are regularly coming to your website to get information. And particularly websites that have blogs. This website doesn't have a blog. Websites that have blogs and are regularly publishing information and have that community of visitors often see a higher returning visitor percentage because we've got people who are coming back regularly to read the new blog posts or access resources. So that's one aspect of looking at your new versus returning, is just that overall percentage breakdown. But we can also look through these behavioural characteristics in the table and see if there are any differences between the two with the bounce rate, the number of pages they're viewing per session, the amount of time they're spending on site, and again, if you're tracking any conversions, those conversions there as well. So I can see, there's not some huge differences for me, but what I can see is that returning visitors do tend to be more engaged. They're viewing more pages per session, and they have a slightly higher session duration. But I'm actually getting more online inquiries from the new visitors than from those returning visitors. So I've got a mix of people who are returning multiple times, possibly researching before they look into or inquire about doing a training course, and a lot of people who are just, browsing around and having a look. So you can think about different ways that you could market to these visitors if you want to actually be encouraging them to come back to your website. Remarketing display advertising is a really useful way of reminding people that they have visited your website and encouraging them to come back, particularly if you are in an area where people are likely to be shopping around and likely to be visiting a few different providers before they make a decision about who they're going to go with, because it's really easy to forget where we've gone. So start to build that picture of people who have visited your website once versus people who have visited your website multiple times as well. Alrighty, moving down, I'm going to have a look at the technology section. And specifically in this area, I'm going to look at browser and operating system. This isn't a report that I generally look at. And one of the ways that we actually used to use this report a lot when I worked in website development is to get a really good understanding of which browsers we wanted our websites to work in and where we should really focus our attention when we were browser testing websites. And that's certainly a way you can use this report as well. But again, you can also get an understanding of the type of person who's visiting your website based on the type of browser they're using, as well as making sure they're having a great experience on that website as well. So we can see here that I've definitely got a dominance with Chrome visitors. I mean, Google's Chrome browser is a very popular browser. It's also one that doesn't come by default with a lot of systems and needs to be installed, and does tend to be installed by people who are relatively tech savvy. So obviously we're painting a bit of a picture here and making some assumptions about people, but this is what this profiling is all about as well. So like I said, that's one way that I can look at the types of people who are coming to my website, as well as focusing on making sure the website performs really, really well in that browser. Interestingly, the next most popular is Android Web View. And again, that's one that, while there's 21.44% of visitors to the website from that browser, they're spending an average of 15 seconds on the site. So it doesn't seem like they're having a very good experience, and that not so much on the profiling perspective, but is something I've got to see what the potential issues are with my website in that browser and see if I can fix them, because there's something that is that seems to be putting people off. Wouldn't spend a huge amount of time in here, but see if there's anything of interest that pops out, particularly if there's any high percentage. If they're all about the same, it might be difficult to use that information. But if, like me, you've got something that's at that majority percentage-wise, it can go on your list, your profiling list, as we're building that picture. Going to jump down to mobile now and look at mobile overview. And this is a report that I recommend you look at regularly to really understand how people are accessing your website. So globally, we have reached that tipping point where the majority of browsing is actually happening on mobile devices rather than desktop devices, and we're only going to see that increase. And that's certainly true with this website as well. So if I combine mobile and tablet, there's actually more than 60% of visitors to my website are coming from mobile devices, and just under 40% are coming from desktop computers. knowing this is really important for people who manage websites, because the majority of us actually manage our website from a desktop computer most of the time, and that's our experience is usually from a desktop. So make sure you're spending time looking at your website and browsing your website on a mobile device to really understand the experience that those visitors are having, because there's a very good chance that they're going to be the bulk of the visitors to your site. And this is something that I'm actually aware of, that while my website is mobile responsive, the mobile version is not the best that it can be, and I'm working on improving that at the moment. And that's evident through here. We can see that the visitors from mobile devices tend to view less pages per session, they have a higher bounce rate, and they have a much shorter average session duration. That itself isn't always a sign that there's something wrong with the mobile version of your site though. People do tend to browse and use websites a lot more quickly on mobile devices. We don't leave tabs open and wander away like we do on desktop computers. We're often very action oriented. We're going in, we're getting information, we're getting out. So generally, I would say the average session duration can be quite low for mobile devices. But again, this is about actually using the mobile version of your website and seeing if it's giving people the best experience that it can as well. I'll also show you another trick with segments in a bit, where you can understand exactly what those mobile users are doing on your website rather than just using this mobile report. Alrighty, jumping down to benchmarking. Okay, this is a report that I don't spend a huge amount of time in, and I do recommend taking it with a grain of salt. But in this exercise profiling website visitors, it can be useful to see how you're performing against other similar type websites. So this does actually rely on whoever's installed or set up the Google Analytics code, having selected the industry that the website is active in, and pulling in that information. But what it allows you to do is select your industry. By default, it shows internet and telecom, but you can go through all of these and try and find the industry that's most relevant to your offering. So I can go down, we've got, let's say, vocational and continuing education. I can also select my country and region. So I can look not just at Australia, but specifically at South Australia. And you have an option there, which you don't have any data because there's not enough happening in that competitor region. The other option you have is to size by daily sessions as well. I'll actually put this back just to Australia, all regions. So we have some data to work with. And again, it's going to depend on your website and industry as to how much you get out of this. But you'll see below we've got a table here. We're looking at channels. So it's giving you an idea of how your website is performing against the average. So what we can see here is in this particular industry vertical group, the average website has had 2,000 sessions during that time frame, and my website's had 6,000 sessions. So that's exciting. I'm getting more visitors than the average, but there's not as many new sessions as what the average is, or the percentage of new sessions is lower. The pages per session, the average session duration, the bounce rate is also lower than average as well. So there's a few areas, if we're looking at competitor sites, we don't know exactly what those competitor sites are, and that's why I say, like, take it with a bit of a grain of salt. But you can use this if you want to get a feel for how your website is performing, because this is potentially, if you're in an area where you do have visitors who are shopping around, they're going to be having experiences on different sites, and this is a little bit of an insight into how your website performs against them. So you can click through not only channels, obviously I've already picked Australia, so that's all it's going to show me, devices. So again, this can be used, like I said, with seeing how the mobile version of your website is performing against other sites. You might have a high amount of sessions, but here we can see the pages per session, the session duration, the bounce rate is quite low compared to those other sites. So presumably it's not just the fact that people are browsing quickly, but it's not giving the best mobile experience that it can. So in addition to this profiling exercise that I'm doing, I'm making a little note of actions to the site, which is definitely to improve that mobile version of the site. So like I said, benchmarking, do take it with a grain of salt. I definitely recommend focusing on improving your own website and your own experience and looking at how that is changing month on month rather than comparing yourself to other people and other websites. But we are fortunate that we have this type of information available, so you can go in and see how that performance, how you are performing in your industry vertical. Okay, 2 more reports in the audiences section that I want to show you. And the second to last one is users flow. And this is one of the data visualization reports that Google offers. And it can't be exported in a CSV like the other ones do with tables, but you can actually export it as a PDF, which is quite nice. And it's more so I use it less for my reports, but more for when I'm analysing my website traffic to get an understanding of how people are moved through the website. So by default, it's going to show the traffic from different countries, but you can click on this drop down and select any dimension that Google Analytics is tracking and have a look at how users with that dimension are moving through the website. So you can either click through the different sections and find the one that you're looking for. You can display all of them as an alphabetical list. So you can see there's so much information here that you can find, or you can search for it as well. So one of the ones that I like to look at is default channel grouping. So these are the main acquisition channels with how people access your website. So already you're going to see that breakdown of the majority of traffic have come directly to the website, 3.1K during that time period, 3,100, followed by organic search, followed by social, followed by display. It'll show you the first page that group visited, their second page or their first interaction, and so on and so on. And what you can do is actually highlight the traffic through each of these. So if we click on social, for example, we can either highlight traffic through this segment, and you'll see it's going to start getting really messy, which is a bit difficult to track, but it's more about giving you that general idea of what's going on. And hovering over these will give you more information. So over half of the traffic, 53.5%, went through after the home page. That / at the top of that box denotes that we're looking at the home page because it's the URL after your domain. But just under 50% of that traffic dropped off. So under half of that traffic that came from social, that landed on the home page, actually left the website, bounced off the website, didn't look any further, which is obviously a bit of a concern. And we can look at all of the other pages through there as well. Can clear that highlighting. We can look at only this segment. So if we just want to look at our social, so that we're not, okay, I haven't got enough data to show that, unfortunately. So we'll go back to the main one. But you can see there's a lot there that you can click around with to get a feel for how people are actually moving through your website and identify if there might be any particular pages of concern or particular areas of concern where people are choosing to leave the website rather than move on. Perhaps there isn't a clear next action for them to take. They might get to the end of reading a page or reading a blog post and there's nothing else to do. There's no contact us, there's no read this next page, there's no you might also be interested in related products, related services. So think about, again, it's not so much a profiling thing, though we are understanding how people have moved through, but looking for ways to make your website more engaging as well. Just open this back up. Okay, I've got 15 minutes. The last report that I want to show you in the audiences section is actually back up the top here. It's called User Explorer. And it looks pretty boring, but it's actually incredibly interesting and very, very valuable. So on the left-hand side here, we've got a client ID number, and the client ID is actually the number that Google Analytics assigns to every user who visits your website. It's a unique ID, and it is based on the device from which the user is engaged. So at the moment, it's still separating those activities, but with the cross-device tracking that's coming in, we should be able to piece those together. And it tracks every single user that has come to your website during that time frame. So we're obviously looking quite a big time frame. You get 8 months here. And so it's actually recorded 5,154 different, or it's assigned that many different user IDs. But we can see here the number of sessions that each of those individual devices has had, the average time they've spent on site, the bounce rate. If you're tracking, if you have an e-commerce website and have e-commerce analytics enabled, you'll be able to see the revenue and transactions that they've contributed. And if you're tracking any goals, a conversion rate there as well. And you can click on any of these to understand how those people are actually working through your website. So what I generally do is just click on a couple randomly. I'm certainly not going to go through 5,000 of them, but particularly looking at ones that perhaps have an high average session duration, or have had a quite large number of sessions and have a low bounce rate. So this is about finding those ideal website visitors, because we're profiling the people who are most attracted to our website. So if I click on this one, it's basically like a little CRM. So it's developed a profile, an anonymous profile for this person. We can see some information here on the left-hand side about the first time they visited the website, acquisition date, the last time they visited the website, which channel they came through the first time, what device they're using, so web or mobile. Christy, yes, there is absolutely a way to eliminate your own viewing of the website. It's called setting up an IP address filter, and you can do that in the admin section. I'll find a link and pop it in the notes afterwards, and I can send it out as well. It's best to set it up as a separate view though, so that you're not actually, so it's always good to have one view that is all website data, so you still have that understanding of everyone who's coming to the website, and you can create a separate view that removes IP address of internal traffic or people who might be skewing the results there. So as you can see here, you can see every single visit that this particular user has had to the website from that particular device. You can open these and see exactly which pages they've viewed, if they've completed any goals and those types of things. We don't know who this person is specifically, but we can see that they have come back a number of times. And I said, if we're looking at if repeat visitors are important to us and we want to understand, ask them come back, what are they looking at, what decisions, what are they hesitating with, we can create some of those or develop some of those assumptions with this report through here. So really, really worthwhile to just go through, click on a couple of them, see what you can deduce, if anything, from this information. It's a really valuable report that feels quite buried and should really be utilised, and is certainly really, really valuable for this experience. So that was just showing you one example. You can go back to the User Explorer, scroll through, find another one. Again, it might be good to look at some of those that have less engagement as well, to maybe understand what, is it just the wrong person? They came to the website by mistake, they were wrongly targeted or thought it was something else. as well as those people who seem like they are really interested in the website and are spending quite a long time there as well. Cool, so I'll just jump back to my notes quickly. So these are the user reports that we've just gone through that are in that audiences section. So we've looked at demographics, interests, location, new versus returning, browser and operating system, mobile, benchmarking, users low and user explorer. So like I said, if you spend about an hour going through those reports, you should be able to make some notes and build a good picture of the types of people who are most engaged with your website, and potentially also highlight those who are not so engaged. The reason why that can be useful is if you are actually doing any other advertising or trying to drive traffic or marketing that drives traffic to your website, it's also useful to know who not to talk to as well. So, for example, one of the things that I discovered through going through this process is with the Facebook ads that we were running at the beginning of the year, we had some specific targets around interests and the location that we were targeting, but we actually kept the age range really broad. So we were advertising when we first started the ads to everyone from 18 to 64 that we're able to target through Facebook, because we just wanted to see who would be interested in these training sessions. As you can see, what we found out really quickly is the people who were in that older age bracket are actually getting quite a lot of traffic for people who were kind of 55, 60 plus, but once they got to the website, they were not interested. They were bouncing off. They clearly thought it was something else, or they were clicking on the ads by mistake. So we learned really quickly that those ads weren't targeted appropriately, and we needed to reduce our audience back to that 24 to 44-year-old age group for Facebook ad targeting. Obviously, anybody else is still welcome to come to the website, but being mindful of the money we're spending and the people we're really trying to focus our attention on. So you've got that understanding of who not to target, but we've also built a picture here of going, okay, predominantly looking at women in the 24 to 44-year-old age group, quite news savvy, interested in current affairs, interested in business advertising and marketing, tend to use mobile devices, tend to be based within Adelaide, South Australia, which is the market we're looking at, and tend to use Chrome as well. So a few things there that I can use to develop that audience persona, as well as a few tasks for me, which is really improving the mobile experience on my website. Now, another thing we can do to focus in on those ideal users once we have an understanding of who they are is making use of segments. So segments are a subset of sessions or users that share common attributes. And that's really what we've been doing. We've been trying to develop an understanding of the common attributes of our ideal website visitors. So these segments, they allow you to isolate sessions or users individually for better analysis. So by default, we see all users that come to the website, and it gives us some nice big numbers, and it can make us feel really good. But a lot of them might not be relevant. As we've seen, people who are in that younger age group and older age group in my website, while they make up some of the visits to the website, they're really not interested in what I have to offer. They're spending a very little amount of time on site. They're having a high bounce rate, so that's contributing to the overall average behavioural measurements that we're getting on the site. So what we can do instead is segment our reports, so we're actually looking at people who are of the most interest to us or are most important to us, looking at how they're actually using the website. So there's a number of existing system segments that exist within every Google Analytics account that you already have access to, or you can create your own custom segments. And that's where, once you've already developed a bit of a target audience persona, you might build a custom segment around them to really focus on how they're using your website. So we'll jump back into Google Analytics for this last couple of minutes. And as you can see up here in the top left-hand corner, we're looking at all users. So this is 100% of the visitors that Google Analytics has been able to track to the website. And next to it, we've got a little grayed out box that says Add Segment. And that'll open up this drop down. Now, I've actually already created a number of custom segments, and they're shared across all my Google Analytics accounts. So if you have access to a number of Google Analytics accounts or properties, then you're going to be able to use these segments across them. You can also share them with other users as well. But if we just look at, first of all, so we can look at, these are the system segments. So these are all the segments that are available within Google Analytics already, and they're actually adding new segments to them because a lot of these are quite common and quite popular ones that are worth looking at. So by default, you can see we are looking at all users. That's been ticked there, but we can also tick any of these and see how they're just focus on that traffic. So we can look at bounce sessions, people who have converted, direct traffic, mobile traffic. That's one that I actually like to have a look at. So I'll just show you this example with the system segment. I've ticked mobile traffic as looking at mobile traffic and all users. I'll click apply. And you can see now the blue lines and the blue information are all of my users, and the orange is looking at just the people who are coming from mobile devices. So we can see where there are those differences there with not only their engagement with the website, but their behaviour on the site there as well. So you can browse all of your Google Analytics reports with these segments applied that don't permanently change your data at all. So filters, like I mentioned earlier to Christy's question about removing your own visits from traffic, do be wary of applying filters because they do permanently change your data. So you've just got to add them correctly. But segments you can turn on and off. All they're doing is showing you that subset of users or sessions so you can focus on them specifically. You don't have to have two of them applied. You can have 1, 2, 3. You can apply more and more segments, and you can turn them on and off. So we might just want to look at our mobile traffic. We're not interested in all users because I know that there's not a great engagement with the mobile traffic on this website. I could choose to browse all of my Google Analytics reports just looking at mobile users and get my head around how are these mobile users visiting the website, where are they dropping off, what pages are they looking at, what's really important to them. So that's something you can do there. This is going to be a really quick look at segments. So we can uncheck that. We can also create our own custom segments, like I mentioned. So there's a red button there called New Segment. And that'll open up this panel. And we've got all sorts of dimensions. This is all information that Google Analytics has been tracking us to build our own segment. So we might want to just focus on my ideal audience and get an ending of how they're using the website. So I can look at, from an age perspective, we're going to look at people who are from 25 to 44. And you'll see here on the right-hand side, it'll start showing you what percentage of users actually conform to that segment. What you're going to see. We might also want to look at specifically female. We can look at the locations. We want to look at the region, which is South Australia. And what's really great about these is they're actually pulling in data from your Google Analytics, so you don't need to type exactly. It's going, these are all of the regions that have an S in them from my Google Analytics account. And we can also look at just those who are using mobile devices as well. So we can say we just want to look at those. Obviously, we're getting to a very specific portion here, but it's going to give us a better understanding. Actually, I want to show you something. I'm going to uncheck mobile. Like I said, you can click through all of these and look at the number of sessions, the first session, the traffic source. You might want to look at just women in that age group from South Australia who came from social, for example. I'm going to focus more on these demographics. You can give my segment a name. You can edit these names and you can edit and delete all of the segments. They're really flexible in that regard, but you want to make it something that's makes sense to you when you apply it. So females 25 to 44-year-old in South Australia. and save. I actually want to turn off my mobile traffic. So I'm just going to look at the ones that I've selected. I'm going to turn them off, but I do want to pop my all users back on. So here we can see that comparison between, obviously this is a small portion, so of the 1,000 people who have come to the website through the year, women in that age bracket from South Australia are making up just over 700 of them. But we can focus on specifically what they're looking at. So they're having slightly more sessions per user, they're viewing slightly more pages per session than the average, they're having a slightly longer and a slightly lower bounce rate. It's not a huge difference, but where it will be useful is to actually browse these reports further and look at what pages they're looking at, what times they're visiting the website, what they're most interested in, what devices they're using, how they're accessing the website, the acquisition channels, those types of things. So, and again, that can take a little bit longer, and this is a bit of a speedy introduction to segments, but hopefully that gives you an understanding of how you can make use of those capabilities of Google Analytics to focus on the people who are most engaged with your website. Cool, so I'll just flick back here again. So these are the reports that we've gone through. Like I said, recommend giving yourself about an hour, at least an hour, to go through all of those and see if you can pick out any kind of peaks. We're looking for these, the trends, the high trends of the types of people who are coming to your website that seem to be most engaged with your website as well. Note them down to try and build that profile of your ideal website visitor, and either see how that matches up with your existing picture. You might have in your marketing or business strategy an idea of who your ideal customer is. Does that match up with the types of people that you think you're targeting? Or if you don't have that information already, you could look at using that information to help build you of who that person is. And you can add a lot more information to that as well. Hopefully you can start to flesh it out with what types, specifically what websites they may be visiting, if they're interested in news. You might know some of these people personally, so they might be able to get a better understanding of what areas they work in and use other signals from other areas. But as you can see, there's a lot of information within Google Analytics that you can use for this type of market research. So visitors are really, really important to our website and really, really valuable. And hopefully this has given you a bit of an understanding of another way of using your Google Analytics to understand who they are and speak to them in a more direct and appealing and engaging way that you can use across not only your website, but your other marketing channels as well. So thanks very much for everybody who joined. If you are interested in learning more about how you can use Google Analytics, I am going to put together a calendar of other webinars for the rest of the year and hopefully start doing these a bit more again. I'm also running a couple of Google Analytics workshops in September in Adelaide, if you're interested in coming along, where we can spend a good 4.5 hours jumping into your Google Analytics and going through the reports to make sure you can understand how to get the most of it as well. Again, apologies if you weren't able to log on last week, but hopefully you got we obviously got to join in now for those of you who are here, and I'll be sending out the video of this so you can watch it again later on as well. There I am. Hi. I'm going to hang around for a few more minutes, so if you have any questions you want to type in the chat box, I'm happy to answer them there for you, or feel free to contact me either through the website or on social with any questions as well. Always happy to chat Google Analytics, and like I said, I'll find that link in IP filters and pop that in the chat box for you, Christy, and anyone else who's interested, and it might be one to do in a future webinar as well. So thanks again. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of the day. I was going to say afternoon, it's not quite there yet. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you online another time. Bye.